Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unacademy, the one-stop destination for the civil services English medium aspirants. Welcome back to the daily Hindu analysis. We have a couple of articles that we will discuss today from the Delhi edition of the Hindu. 3 topics will be discussed in some amount of detail because they require that kind of explanation, and the other 4 topics are particularly oriented for your prelims related factual information that can be converted into an MCQ. So let's dive into this. Before we do, a very important announcement. We are launching multiple batches in the coming days, be it the bilingual program, be it the English medium program, or be it the Hindi medium program. You can enroll in these batches because it provides you a comprehensive package for both your prelims preparation as well as your mains preparation. Another advantage is that if you subscribe to the package, you can enroll in any batch. You can see multiple batches after the subscription. You're not confined to one batch only, and therefore you can access multiple classes in one day. So make sure that you check out the batches that are going live, and that is why we've also come up with an offer at this time, which is only available till the 23rd of June. So make sure that you make use of this offer where you're getting a subscription for 12 months for 24,999, and that will be extended till 3 months free of cost. Make sure that you know these prices. It is an all-inclusive batch. Everything is provided, no separate CSAT preparation, no separate amount to be given for the test series. Everything is included in this particular price. If there are any other questions, please feel free to call on this number and all your queries will be answered. Let's begin with our first topic for the day. So the first topic for the day is, should not EVs and hybrids be treated equally for government subsidies? So the idea, the agenda of the topic is around electronic vehicles or hybrid vehicles in the broader domain of decarbonization of the transport sector. Why do we need to decarbonize the transport sector? We'll have a lot of pointers. We will do a thorough analysis of EVs, and also in that thorough analysis, we will have a subset of what the writer is trying to convey, that how are hybrids not getting the same kind of attention or support from the government as compared to the EVs, and the writer is basically putting forward a case where the hybrid should also be given the attention, and also mentioning few of the problems or limitations, particularly when it comes to the electronic vehicles that we are facing currently. Okay, so in that context, it is important for your GS paper 3 in the domain of environment, so pollution related, climate change related aspects, and also economy, because sometimes the FAME India scheme, faster adoption of electronic vehicles, can be associated with the electronic vehicles production as well. So this can be considered as a joint topic for the same. The context is, now why are we even talking about electronic vehicles? That should be your question. Why we are talking is that the transport sector, your vehicles, your two-wheelers, your four-wheelers, your transportation when it comes to cargo, everything is contributing a lot to the greenhouse gas emissions, which in turn is leading to the problem of global warming that we are battling. So India's transport sector contributes about 12% of CO2 emissions of the country. So the amount of emissions that we emit, 12% of the composition is contributed by just the transport sector. This is a report by International Energy Agency. I'm sorry about the typo. This is IEA. So International Energy Agency. These are excellent pointers. Please note for introductory fodder for your mains answers as well. Okay, so in this context, what we need to do is that we need to decarbonize the transport sector if we want to halt the process of global warming, if we want to tackle the problem of climate change. And that is why electronic vehicles are back in focus. Okay, so you must know what is the need for the same. Why are we even having a discussion in order to adopt electronic vehicles? Okay, all right. So what is decarbonization of transport sector is essential, as I had already discussed, to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that are contributed to that particular sector. It is very important to do so as to achieve, and that will be imperative, that will be a prerequisite for us to achieve our target of net zero emissions of by 2070 that India has particularly promised. So that is the context of your answer. Anytime that you get an answer on electronic vehicles, talk about the significance of the electronic vehicles, why being electronic or transportation sector decarbonization is extremely important. Okay, so the second context, so the second topic is, now how do we decarbonize? So decarbonization was our first thing that we understood. The second portion of our discussion is, how do we decarbonize? In that, the answer is better adoption or more adoption of electric and hybrid vehicles which are less polluting. In fact, electric vehicles are not polluting at all. There are practically no emissions. Okay, so that is the agenda for today. So in that context, we have a FAME India project or a scheme by the Ministry of Heavy Industries called Faster Adoption of Manufacturing of Hybrid and Electric Vehicles. What this scheme particularly does is that even though electric vehicles might be expensive, that could lead to a disincentive for the buyer to purchase it. So the government, if it wants some environmental benefits, then they would provide some sort of subsidy. They will provide some sort of assistance so that the upfront cost is cheaper, and I as a customer am incentivized to buy and adopt EV technologies. So that is the agenda of it. It incentivizes the buyer to reduce by reducing the upfront cost that the buyer has to give in terms of purchasing an electronic vehicle. And this basically is to increase the demand for electronic vehicles, to have the change in mindset and adoption of electronic vehicles. Clear? So that is the FAME India scheme, etc. But what is the author talking about? That the author is saying that in terms of the trend that we have seen, the kind of assistance that the government is giving to the electronic vehicles, it is not providing. It is slowly decreasing that amount of assistance for hybrid vehicles. And that is what the author or the writer wants to say, that there are a lot of limitations when it comes to EV vehicles as well. Then why not also give the same kind of support to hybrid vehicles? So in that context, let's dive into why EV vehicles, first of all, or the limitations relating to EV vehicles. Some of the government efforts in this domain, if you have to write a little more on this, except for the FAME India scheme, are the production linked incentive scheme. It will simply basically it incentivizes manufacturing. If you increase the amount of sales in a particular product, the manufacturing in a particular product, you will be incentivized by the government. What will it do? It will lead to more manufacturing in the country. So this particular scheme targets a few sectors in which the incentives are given. One of those sectors is also the automobile sector. The second sector, which is also very important, that is for the development of batteries that are crucial for any kind of EV technology. That is also supported under this scheme. The GST that is charged on electronic vehicles has also been reduced so as to make it a popular option in the eyes of the customers. Okay, Ministry of Road and Transport and Highways basically has also exempted the vehicles. Green plates have been given to electronic vehicles, and they are exempted from a lot of permits and therefore additional costs. So these are some of the ways in which governments are basically promoting the electronic vehicles. Now let's come to in general, before diving into why not subsidies for hybrid or why are the subsidies lessening for hybrid, you must know basics about the difference between electronic vehicles and hybrid vehicles. So let's do that. Okay, the only difference between the two is in the way that they are powered. What do you mean by powered? Who supplies the power? So for instance, in electronic vehicle, the power or the power is supplied only using batteries. So recharging of battery, and the battery is supporting the particular vehicle. In hybrid vehicles, hybrid means a mix of two, a combination of two. So here you have an option. You have an engine as well. So it is powered by fuel as well, like the regular petrol and diesel that you put in the cars with with a particular engine which generate power on the basis of combustion of the fuel, and also the battery. Okay, and also another storage option, which is the battery, and this can be switched. This can be switched whichever mode you are using at any time. So hybrid vehicles are more of a flexible order, providing two sources of power, versus electronic vehicles are only based on batteries. Electronic vehicles will not particularly have an engine. It will have a motor to run the particular car. The hybrid vehicles will have an electric engine in order to burn the fuel as well as motor. So the main difference that you need to remember is the power source. The power source in electronic vehicles is 1. The power source in hybrid, as the name suggests, is 2. Okay, now the advantage of electronic vehicles is that it leads to no emissions. It leads to no emissions, and that is why it is considered extremely environment friendly and very, very good when it comes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the transport sector. Hybrid, on the other hand, is lesser emissions as compared to your traditional vehicles that are in use today, okay, which are only based on the combustion of fuel, but a little more more emissions as compared to EV vehicles, because whenever you are using the component of fuel, you will be emitting some emissions. So that is the difference between the two. The distance, now this is important. How reliable can electronic vehicles be, or is there a limitation when it comes to how much can you travel with electronic vehicles? That is correct. The distance is, the range of the distance that can be covered is lesser, because constant recharging will be required, and in the current infrastructure that we have, the charging infrastructure, the charging points on major roads, highways, etc. are still not so developed. So the distance can be a little bit of a disincentive when it comes to electronic vehicles, versus for an hybrid vehicle, the distance range is long because it is flexible. Even if the charge of the battery is gone, it can constantly switch to a different mode and use the fuel as a source, which is readily available in most parts of the country on major roadways. Okay, so that is the major difference. I've added a definition here as well. Hybrid switches seamlessly between two power sources, an efficient petrol engine as well as a battery, whereas an electronic vehicle only relies on the battery power. I hope this is clear. Before we head into further discussion, an important difference between the two must be known. Okay, now let's in general talk about what are the issues and limitations of electronic vehicles, because that is what the writer was talking about. We will dive into many issues and also include the issues that the writer had specifically raised. Okay, so the issues and limitations of electronic vehicles are, first and foremost, which is why the FAME India scheme that we just spoke about was introduced, the high upfront cost as compared to the traditional cars with an engine. Okay, so high upfront cost is a major disincentive, and it can deter the price sensitive consumer in the initial adoption. Okay, of course the costs are much lesser later because of less use of fuel, where fuel is extremely expensive, but those are benefits which you have later. The initial upfront cost could be seeming a little higher to an ordinary consumer. So the first point or the first issue when it comes to the adoption of electronic vehicles is high upfront cost. The second issue is that even if I've bought an electronic vehicle, there are multiple issues in terms of has the infrastructure, the supporting infrastructure developed according to, or is it keeping pace with the adoption? So I might take the vehicle, but if I go on a highway and I do not find a charging infrastructure for very long, for a very long distance, then that will deter. That will basically, I will have a very a not so favorable opinion of the electronic vehicle. I would feel that I will always have that constant anxiety. And in the context of electronic vehicles, there is a term called the range anxiety, that till which distance will I be able to move with this amount of charge. We often have that anxiety even when our phones are dying out of battery, right? So imagine if you're stuck in the middle of a road and your charging infrastructure is not available close by because the adoption or the increase in charging infrastructure is maybe not keeping pace with the adoption in the market. So that can be a huge disadvantage for electronic vehicles. Clear? So this can also be a disadvantage. That supporting infrastructure, you can call charging infrastructure, supporting infrastructure is inadequate. What are the other problems? The third problem is something that is a back-end problem, and we don't come to realize it unless we do a thorough analysis. Most electronic vehicles, in fact all electronic vehicles, will need to have a battery in order to store the power. After charging, in order to store the power in a battery. And battery requires, the making or the manufacturing of battery requires certain critical minerals in which India is particularly deficient. We are not self-sufficient. In fact, we are dependent a lot on imports. So raw materials dependence or requirement is extremely high for any. That is why when we talk about critical minerals, the first thing that we talk about critical minerals is that they are used a lot in emerging technology. They are also extremely instrumental in greening technology, in greening transitions. So this is what I mean by they are extremely instrumental, because they are used in the manufacturing of batteries. What are these minerals? Lithium, cobalt are really important for the manufacturing or the components of lithium ion batteries, which are used in electronic vehicles. Since we are dependent on imports, sometimes we are also vulnerable to the price volatility. If the import price is higher, our production costs will also become higher. So because of that, there is a lot of dependence, there is a lot of price volatility that can happen in the manufacturing process. Okay, so that is the problem with electronic vehicles, and this is something that particularly the author had spoken about, that as compared to electronic vehicles, hybrid vehicles do not require a huge battery. They do not require a battery with a lot of voltage or charge, and a small battery can also be provided and can be made, thereby reducing the amount of raw materials that is required, which we are dependent on foreign imports for. So that is the limitation that the author talks about when it comes to electronic vehicles. Okay, so please make sure. And yesterday also I think we had discussed the lithium triangle. In that context, these critical minerals become very important. The fourth problematic issue is the source of power in grids. Now, okay, we've done step one, that we've increased the adoption of electronic vehicles. We've done step two also, that we've started, our charging infrastructure is up to date, is up to mark, and is providing for the demand that is generated by the increase in electronic vehicle. The third question that we ask is the power that is supplied in the charging infrastructure. What is contributing to that power? That power is driven by which source? Is it renewable energy or is it coal powered? Okay, and that is a big issue that the author raises, and it says that much of, you're talking about electronic vehicles being extremely environment friendly, but if you look at the back end, so electronic vehicles by themselves do not lead to any emissions. They do not lead to any emissions. But if you look at the back end, of this, They need to be charged. The charging stations need to be given power. This power is generated by which source will also determine if electronic vehicles are significantly contributing to reduction of emissions or not. It is a back-end linkage or a forward linkage as however you want to understand it. So the source of power in the power grids or in the charging infrastructure is also important for us to consider. Electricity generally, the majority electricity is still not produced by non-fossil fuel sources in India. It is a target to have 50% of the electricity generation or power generation from non-fossil fuel sources, but coal-related power generation is still dominating the electricity generation or the power generation sector. And this in turn, when you use coal to generate electricity, this in turn will again lead to more greenhouse gas emission. You're using a fossil fuel source. So even though it is not directly emitting, but is it using some kind of a power source that is emitting greenhouse gas emission? That is the agenda that the author is talking about. Okay. The fifth is the end of life battery management. Now, a lot of times you would have heard that electronic wastes are extremely hazardous. There are a lot of heavy metals which, if they are leaching in the ground, they could lead to a lot of health problems, etc. So how do you dispose these batteries? What happens at the end of the lifetime of an electronic vehicle? How do we recycle those? Those kind of technologies also have to be thought about, and that can be a issue. Okay, so environmental, how to basically make sure that it is not hazardous for the environment and it is disposed of safely, it is recycled as much as possible. Those are important areas that we right now have not figured out. Okay, the lack of awareness and misconceptions, of course, a lot of mindset change is required to convince people of the benefits of electronic vehicles, and that right now works as a limitation. There has to be a lot of awareness generation, a lot of boost, a lot of incentive given by the government, and that's when the awareness will lead to actual adoption. The seventh is like how you have mechanics for your traditional cars, your normal cars, there will be a requirement for a particular skill set when it comes to the maintenance of electronic vehicles. Has that been at the same pace with the adoption? So you need, the skilling has to be done for a particular type of workforce which can work for the maintenance of electronic vehicle. But there exists a skill gap that we need to close so that there are no problems. Even when people buy it, they can be serviced, they can be maintained, and all these services are provided readily. They are provided easily. Okay, so these are in general the problems. Please make sure that you note this. Electronic vehicles is a very important topic. Now, in that context, there is a question. Decarbonization of the transport sector is an imperative to achieve the net zero emissions target by 2070 that India has contributed or has committed to. In this context, discuss the obstacles faced in the adoption of electronic vehicles. Did you understand the context? Now, please note, and this is important, whenever there is a statement given in the beginning of the question, that does not mean that you completely ignore the statement. The statement has to be addressed first. Like how I began the topic, you have to talk about how electronic vehicles, you have to connect the point of how, what is first of all, why is decarbonization? Why decarbonization of the transport sector important? In that context, you will give data. For instance, the 12% data that we had spoken about, the report of International Energy Agency. You've given that amount of data. Then you connect it to why in this process, if you need to decarbonize, to halt global warming, to halt climate change, an important area is electronic vehicles. Okay, and then you can, in a 10 marker, you can straight away start with what are the obstacles. And in the conclusion, please do not be very pessimistic about the limitations. If it's a question even about limitations, you can say that even though the limitations remain as of now, there is a lot that can be done in the form of government subsidies, in the form of supply chain resilience when it comes to sourcing raw materials, in the form of better infrastructure, in the form of generation of more renewable energy, sourcing the power structure. So you can say, you can give a very optimistic way forward, particularly as your concluding remarks. Okay, so this is how you can structure your answer. Please make note of this. Now let's move on to our next topic. Next topic is the elderly are ailing, alone and struggling without the means to support themselves. Where does the relevance of this in your paper? It is in GS2 vulnerable sections. Now vulnerable sections can be many. Any particular section which is facing different kind of problems and requires special attention, requires special care. Those are considered vulnerable sections. For instance, women, for instance, children, for instance, elderly, for instance, other backward classes, for instance, tribals. So everyone can be considered as vulnerable sections because their development is not keeping up with the pace with normal development, and therefore some sort of government intervention, assistance is important for these sections. Okay, so proportion of, let's understand what are the problems that generally the elderly or the senior citizens are battling. The proportion of elderly population is increasing. Why is this even an important topic right now? It is an important topic because there has been a lot of focus on the change in the composition of demography. The demography is basically the composition of your population. What constitutes your population? Are they dependent children? Are they dependent senior citizens? Is there a majority of the working population, which is your demographic dividend? So the composition of the population is really changing. In fact, a Lancet study in the month of April had spoken about India for the first time. The total fertility rate in India has dipped below 2. And in that context, there was a direct question in Prelims 2024 on the total fertility rate. There was also a question in Prelims about which are the countries, for instance, Japan, where there is a decline in, where there is an aging population per se, an increase in the number of senior citizens. So in that context, and it is natural, and it's a normal demographic theory that slowly when a country will develop from a developing country to a developed country, slowly the fertility rates or the total fertility rates will reduce, the life expectancy will increase, and therefore the aging population, the proportion of aging population will also increase as a proportion of the total population. So we've been seeing that, and that is why it is important for India to prepare from now. Okay, it is important to prepare from now. So the proportion of elderly population is increasing because of the reduction in total fertility rate, okay, in the reduction in total fertility rate, as well as a rise in life expectancy. People are living longer because of benefits or advancements in healthcare, in technologies, etc. So rise in life expectancy, so the composition, the number of senior citizens, the portion of senior citizens are increasing. So in that context, what should be done targeted for these sectors? What are the problems faced by these sections is an important area. So let's discuss the general problems faced by the senior citizens. So the problems faced by senior citizens, the first and foremost is economic independence, the lack of economic independence. So lack of financial independence is a big problem. So most of them retire at an age of 60, and therefore the income source is devoid. The income source is no more. So therefore there is a problem. There is a certain level of dependence on their children. There is a certain level of dependence when it comes to financial assistance, and this could basically be a big problem. Why is this happening? Because employment opportunities are reducing. Very few people are working beyond a certain age, and therefore lack of income. There is hardly any source of income, and parallelly we see there is a rise of cost of living, of inflation, particularly in the urban cities. So it becomes difficult. Your income stopped at one place, but the rise of income is not stopping. That is increasing almost every year. So how do you keep pace with that? Immediately, the result will be that slowly your disposable income or your disposable amount that you can spend will reduce. Your purchasing power capacity will reduce, and thereby making purchasing decisions extremely restrictive for the elderly. Okay, so lack of financial independence and dependence on their children is a major issue when it comes to the problems faced. Another issue is that most of the employment in this country is generally in the informal sector. What is the problem with this sector? If the employment is in the informal sector, there is no social security schemes, no social security benefits that come even in the time of employment. Otherwise, when a person is employed in the course of their jobs, they will have to provide for certain amount of as premium for social security schemes, to have important decisions to be financially included, to have certain levels of financial planning so that pension can be availed after they are 60. Okay, but here in the informal sector, there is no such other benefits. It is just an income that you receive, or irregular maybe wages that you receive, but no social security planning, financial planning, etc. is done. So therefore, there is a huge problem, that is a lack of pension, which is why you will see a lot of government efforts are in this domain, that is to provide pensions. For example, a question was asked in the prelims, which was Shram Yogi Mandhan Yojana, that is pension. That was a pension particular scheme. Even for the senior citizens, there is a pension scheme called the Pradhan Mantri Vaya Vandana Yojana. That is also for the senior citizens to have a certain, at least a minimum supply of income or assistance in their old age. Okay, so this is important. And a Helpage India study. A Helpage India is an NGO working in the area or the care of senior citizens, had remarked that only 15% of the senior citizens in India had any source of income whatsoever. So that basically identifies or points to a lot of dependence. Okay, the second problem is that health challenges. A lot of health challenges are a part of aging. A lot of degeneration, basic degeneration of basic faculties, for instance, hearing impairment, visual impairment, the problem with motor skills, a lot of disability per se, neurological related impairments such as dementia or Parkinson's or Alzheimer's are generally they are really prominent in the senior citizens, and therefore they require particular care, and that particular care is called geriatric care. But there are very few facilities, there are very few hospitals which specialize only in senior citizen care or geriatric care. So lack of accessibility of those, lack of affordability of those is a very, very big problem when it comes to the issues. Okay, so age-related ailments are a big issue. The access to hospitals, the access to healthcare, the affordability of healthcare is a major issue. So they might be able to access healthcare, but is it affordable? They might be able to access healthcare, but is it qualitative? Okay, is the quality right? So that is why a lot of these senior citizens are generally facing this problem when it comes to age-related ailments. Okay, in fact, the Helpage India study that the article talks about, it says that more than 50% of the surveyed individuals had 2 or more non-communicable diseases. Those are lifestyle diseases extremely prevalent in today's time. For instance, cardiovascular diseases, hypertension, blood pressure, for instance, cancer, diabetes. Those are issues. Diabetes and all these diseases require a lot of expenditure when it comes to treatment. So this is also a big issue. And a big issue associated with the age-related ailments or health challenges is the lack of health insurance. the lack of health insurance, the penetration of health insurance or any kind of insurance is very low in India as compared to other countries. The importance of financial planning is not so emphasized. In fact, a lot of people who are poorer or in the low income bracket cannot even afford to pay that amount of premium in order to plan for their future, in order to plan for any health related crisis or outcomes in the future. So the lack of health insurance is a big issue when it comes to senior citizens. Okay, and this leads to a lot of expenditure. Suddenly, if there is a particular disease, for instance cancer, the treatment requires a lot of expenditure, and most of their expenditure is in the form of out of pocket expenditure. So that is a big burden. Age-associated degeneration, we've understood, visual impairment, issues when it comes to walking, problem of osteoporosis, that is the decrease in bone density a lot, therefore making them more vulnerable to fractures, to ligament tears, etc. Of course, neurological issues such as Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, that can make their day-to-day life extremely difficult. Dementia basically, or Alzheimer's, related to a huge problem when it comes to memory, and therefore that can also contribute or compromise their safety. Okay, age associated degeneration, along with this there is a problem that is, even though what makes them vulnerable, or what adds to a disadvantage when it comes to them, is that the infrastructure that we have today, in the infrastructure that we have in maybe government offices, in public places, is it senior citizen friendly? Are there ramps provided in case a wheelchair has to be accessed? Are there separate seats provided for particular senior citizens? So those kind of infrastructure is also lacking. So senior citizen friendly infrastructure is also the need of the hour. Okay, lack of focused geriatric care. Geriatric care is specific healthcare interventions when it comes to senior citizens. Okay, mental health issues. Now this is extremely important. A lot of senior citizens are abandoned by their families. A lot of senior citizens are neglected by their families. They are considered the non-contributing members, even though they have contributed all their lives. They are neglected, and therefore because of that they suffer from a lot of issues such as depression, anxiety. Also sometimes when they're sent to old age home, there is a problem, there is a lot of stress related to the separation from their families. The timings are changing. In fact, with the coming up of nuclear families, the children are living with their spouses in maybe an urban cities, and parents are having to manage on their own in maybe a different part of the country. So all this relates to or creates a lot of mental health issues which are often not addressed. In fact, there are other issues that you can still keep talking about. The list is not exhaustive. For instance, digital divide, that can be a very big problem. Most of you would have experienced that your parents, also being just another generation older, would generally come to you for any technological help. That how do you do this in a mobile phone? How do you fix this on a laptop screen? So imagine if your parents, which is just the second generation facing this, the older generation, which is maybe your grandparents, what is the kind of digital divide that they are facing? And that is why proper access to society, a proper dignified life is denied to them. Okay, so these are basic issues when it comes to the senior citizens. In this context, let's do a question. Changing demographic composition has changed. Now, please understand, again, as I had mentioned, focus on the question that is given in the statement as well. Changing demographic composition has increased the necessity to prepare well in advance for the aging society. Okay, discuss the problems faced by the elderly and suggest measures to reduce their vulnerabilities. Okay, so in this context, first you will talk about why is this important as early as now, even for a country like India. So you will give the example of other countries, for instance Japan, and you will talk about the normal demographic transition theory. So in this context, if you talk about, you can start with simple examples such as TFR is declining. the TFR is declining and life expectancy is increasing, thereby leading to a higher proportion of the senior citizen population. Okay, they suffer from a lot of disadvantages, therefore making them vulnerable and in need of special care and attention. Okay, and in that context, now you come to what is the demographic composition, what is the transition that is happening, and then you say that even though India now enjoys a huge demographic dividend, that is the majority of the population is the working age population. But this will shift, this ought to shift. The demographic dividend comes with a certain window, and that window we need to prepare with what the transition, we need to prepare with what will happen at the end of the window. Okay, so this is India now. This will be India later. Any given year you can write, where significantly, slowly this proportion of the population, the working age proportion of the population with the development, what will happen is total fertility rate is decreasing. So lesser number of children will be joining the workforce, thereby leading to lesser working age population, and life expectancy has increased. So a higher senior citizen or aging population. This will be the change in dynamics, this will be the change in composition. And in this change in composition, then you say that there is a need to prepare well in advance. And then your first structure, the first part of your answer can be what are the problems, as we had discussed the problems, and the second part can be what are the solutions. The solutions will be simple. If there is any government schemes, you can talk about this. For example, the Vaya Vandana Yojana for pensions, for the Vayoshri Yojana for assisting with devices when it comes to disability, age-old disability, for example, a hearing aid, a wheelchair, etc. is provided. So you can talk about that. You can also talk about the importance of financial inclusion, the importance of social security infrastructure such as pensions, the increase, we need to increase the penetration of the health insurance per se, etc. And you can also talk about a law called the Maintenance of Senior Citizens Act that makes it mandatory for the guardians to take care of them. And do not forget to write an important point when it comes to maybe mental health, because that will add to that one spark in your answer. Clear? And that is how you can do away with this example. Okay, let's come to our next particular topic. Now this topic is difficult to understand where it can be asked, but it is important. It's still important. For instance, this can be asked in disaster management. Disasters are not just natural disasters, they can be human-made disasters also. For instance, a gas leak, and in this context is a poisoning because of illicit liquor. And this has been a recurrent theme in a lot of newspapers that we read when it comes to illicit liquor that leads to a lot of deaths, which is fatal for human beings. And how do you go about it? This can also be asked as health governance in the area of why do we not govern well? Why are they not strict when it comes to the access when it comes to these hazardous illicit liquor? Okay, so it could be asked in this way. Also, there is a certain level of science and tech related aspect, that is, what does methanol particularly do to a human body system? And that could be maybe a prelims related effect that may be asked. Okay, so what is this? What is the context? Let's dive into it. How dangerous is methanol poisoning? Why are we talking about this? Because in Tamil Nadu, almost 38 people have died because of consumption of illicit liquor, country-made substandard quality liquor that had methanol in it in order to increase the concentration of alcohol. Okay, so that is the context of this, and you can, if you would be reading your newspaper, these kind of news about the consumption of illicit liquor is a lot, even from the states, for instance, of Bihar, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, etc. So what are these? Let's understand. They are called hooch tragedies. Okay, they're called hooch tragedies. What are hooch tragedies? It is an incidence of mass poisoning. The consumption acts as a poison. So it is an incidence of mass poisoning or death that is caused by the consumption. That is caused by the consumption of illicitly brewed, okay, illicit brewed unsafe alcohol. Unsafe alcohol, okay, and this is a recurrent, there is a major or a recurrent public health crisis in India. We often hear of this. Now in this context, let's understand what are, first understand that why is this a problem, what are the causes for these huge tragedies, okay, so what are the causes, what contributes to these kind of tragedies, the reasons of the same, and then we will dive into how does methane in these particular type of illicit alcohol contribute to a lot of problems when it comes to humans and in fact death. Okay, so the causes are generally, the first is there is a lot of regulation and enforcement gaps. Okay, there are a lot of laws which talk about the packaging of methanol, where methanol can be used, who can access it, but there is a problem when it comes to implementation. There is a problem when it comes to enforcement. So this talks about a failure of governance per se. Could you not crack down? It is in fact a question on governance, that why could we not crack down on the illicit brewing of this liquor, of country-made liquor that could be so fatal for people. So there is a problem when it comes to regulation and enforcement gaps, even though laws exist in order to make sure that these hazardous substances such as methanol can be only used where it is intended to be used and not in alcohol brewing. Okay, the second is prohibition. You would have heard that instances of instances like these are a lot in for instance states like Bihar. What is the cause? The cause is prohibition. When you have completely prohibited the sale of alcohol, proper brewed alcohol, then it generally, any kind of ban, and that is what you can discuss about anything, any kind of ban generally puts or places the industry in a black market, in an underground market, where people will, in fact, if you don't focus on the reduction of the demand, people will try to access it anyhow that they can. So in the areas where there are prohibition, there is a demand for these illicit alcohol. So states with complete or partial alcohol bans are experiencing this a lot, because illicit or cheap made liquor, substandard quality of liquor is sold a lot in the black markets, and these are not regulated, these are not put through proper food standards and safety, they are not put through particularly industrial regulations of what can be included, what should be the content, how the content has to be displayed in a particular label. All that does not apply to these kind of illicitly made liquor. So in that context, what they do is that they add a lot of methanol. In fact, they add a lot of methanol, which can be a major problem when it comes to human health. Okay, poverty is another cause. A lot of regular alcohol would maybe be expensive, and because a lot of people are battling poverty, they would, and because they would still be really addicted, so what they would do is that they would go and buy the cheaper sources, which are these country-made options. Okay, lack of awareness about what can be the fatal options, what can be the consequences of the consumption, that is also generally what drives people to consume this. So we need to have more awareness campaigns, more awareness generation campaigns. We need to make them aware of the consequences, the grave consequences, which is also death. Okay, so in that context, let's understand what about illicit alcohol or spurious alcohol. Alcohol is generally the usual alcohol that is generally made of ethanol. Ethanol is the particular product or compound which is used to make alcohol, and it is metabolized in the liver of a human being after consumption, and using some enzymes called alcohol dehydrogenase enzymes called ADH. These are made, or this is converted into acetaldehyde. Okay, what happens because of this? Okay, what happens because of this is that in the illicit made alcohol, what they do is, other than ethanol, they are using a very strong substance, that is methanol, to spike the concentration, and that is why methanol can be really, really difficult. And that is why data also suggests, and this was mentioned in the article, that in every huge tragedy, can you see, in every huge tragedy, the poison has been methanol particularly. In fact, just 0.15 ml of pure ethanol per kilogram of a body weight can be devastating, can be fatal. Okay, so that is the problem when it comes to this. Let's come to the effects of methanol poisoning. The effects of methanol poisoning are that even though it will get metabolized by the enzymes that we had talked about, the ADH enzymes, but it will be metabolized in a form that is very, very fatal for human beings, that is formaldehyde. So it will be metabolized into formaldehyde, which will further take the form of formic acid. What happens because of this formic acid is that the pH of the blood decreases. It becomes more acidic, and this is a condition called metabolic acidosis. Okay, and this is a fatal condition. It can lead to a loss or lessening up of oxygen supply, and therefore it can lead to a lot of organ failure. It has also a lot of implication when it comes to visual impairment. A nerve can be targeted, and a lot of people are blind after the consumption of methanol poisoning. Okay, so these are the effects on the body. How do you treat anyone who's consumed alcohol when it comes to methanol consumption? You treat it by providing pharmaceutical grade ethanol. Now, I know this is contradictory. Why would you give the person more alcohol or ethanol, which is also a form of alcohol? That is because what you need to do is that the enzymes need to compete with each other. So the enzymes metabolize ethanol faster, and therefore they would start, if you introduce ethanol, the enzymes will be busy in metabolizing ethanol more than methanol. Okay, so this becomes important. In a way, it is a distraction for the enzymes. The second is formipizole, a particular drug called formipizole. What does that drug do? That drug will simply reduce the pace of the acting of the enzyme, the action of the particular enzymes, in order to metabolize methanol into more toxic forms. A lot of times dialysis is also done in order to flush out the toxins from the particular body. Okay, so that is it. That basics you needed to know about this particular aspect. It will not, the probability is lesser of this to be formed into a complete question, but some small amount of details are important when it comes to huge tragedies. Okay, let's move on to our prelims facts now. The first important news article is limbless amphibian found in the Kaziranga National Park for the first time. Okay, now if you look at the creature, it almost looks like a snake, but it is not a snake. Snakes are reptiles. This is called a amphibian. What is the name of the particular creature? It's called caecilian. Okay, caecilian are basically a type of amphibians. Caecilians here I have mentioned. So it is a striped caecilian that has been found. They are not reptiles, they are not like snakes, but they look like snakes. So caecilians are a group of limbless. They do not have any limbs like snakes. So limbless, they look like worms. The shorter ones look like worm. The longer ones look like snakes, but they are in the group of amphibians. They are particularly found in areas which are, for instance, they are burrowing creatures, so they are found a lot underground and therefore are a lot elusive, and we do not find them quite often. Okay, so they mostly live hidden in soil or in stream beds, and therefore they are not found or discovered as often as as other creatures. Okay, please understand, even if they want in UPSC prelims they ask a lot of terms. So caecilians as a group you should know, you must know. Also reptiles, the study of reptiles as well as amphibians is together, or both of them together clubbed, are called herpetofauna. Okay, and that is why you've heard of herpetologists. So these two groups, the study or groups together, are called herpetofauna. So this caecilian has been found for the first time in the Kaziranga National Park, which is situated in the state of Assam. Okay, a limbless amphibian found. They are burrowing amphibians. They are found in areas of leaf litter, loose soil, underground, etc. They are also considered ancient species. They have been on the face of this planet for very, very long, and therefore the discovery of this can be very important when it comes to the evolution of species, and also very important when it comes to the interconnectedness of the distribution of species across continents. Okay, so this is all that you need to know when it comes to the caecilians or the limbless amphibians that was found in Kaziranga. The second point is when it comes to geography. In fact, this was asked in Prelims 2024 just right now. This is from the daily quiz in the Hindu. Some significant events occurred on June 21st. What is the relevance of June 21st? Why is June 21st so important? June 21st happens to be International Yoga Day. This was asked a few years ago in the prelims, repeated again this year in the prelims. So International Yoga Day was adopted by UNGA on 2014 on 21st of June. What happens on 21st of June is that there is an occurrence of the summer solstice. What do you mean by summer solstice? That the northern hemisphere, the northern part of the earth is tilted maximum towards the sun. Is tilted maximum towards the sun, so that direct rays of the sun are falling on the Tropic of Cancer. In fact, it is considered this point that after the summer solstice, the sun will start its approach towards the south. So this is the highest point till which direct rays of the sun could be felt, that is the Tropic of Cancer. And after this, the turn will be in the apparent movement of the sun to the south. Okay, so in this context, what happens? What is the speciality of this day? That because of this direct axis, because of this tilt all towards the sun, northern hemisphere will have the longest daylight hours, will have the longest day and the shortest night, and that is summer solstice. Okay, so maximum tilt towards the sun of the northern hemisphere, the longest period of daylight and shortest night of the year will happen on this day. Okay, on this day there will be constant, okay, there will be higher, and this was the question. Can you see the prelims question? On June 21st every year, which of the following latitudes experience a sunlight of more than 12 hours? It will not be equator, and this is the one that we are talking about. Can you see the northern hemisphere being tilted towards the sun? This is the equator, but here will be the Tropic of Cancer. Here will be the Arctic Circle. So the places in the northern hemisphere will experience daylight for more than 12 hours. What are the options that are in the northern hemisphere? The Tropic of Cancer as well as the Arctic Circle. So your answer is 2 and 4. Okay, so that is why 21st June generally they've asked twice, so you must know the concept of summer solstice. Let's move on to our next topic. In economy, this was just an article not to be discussed in a lot of detail, but since the GST Council was mentioned here, just few important pointers when it comes to what the GST Council is. The GST Council, for the first and foremost thing that you need to remember, is a constitutional body. Is a constitutional body added by a Constitutional Amendment Act under the Article 279A. So please make note of that. It is a constitutional body. Okay. The second is the chairperson who will lead the GST Council. The chairperson will be the finance minister. Members will be Union Minister of State in charge of Revenue or Finance, and also ministers responsible for finance and taxation, or any other minister that is nominated by the state governments. So both have representation, center as well as states. In fact, in terms of the voting weightage, The center has a lesser voting weightage, that is 1/3 of weightage when it comes to votes, and the states combined have a 2/3 weightage when it comes to voting in the GST Council. The decision, any decision to be adopted by the GST Council must have a majority or the weighted majority of 3/4 of votes. Clear? It is the job or the particular function of the GST Council is to recommend taxes that will be, so where all the GST will be exempted, in which areas GST will be applied, which are the taxes that will be subsumed, when will there be a new application of GST, what are the rates and the rate slabs when it comes to different products. That is the objective or function of the GST Council. Okay? The next is an important topic in polity. So for polity, Mr. Mehtab was appointed as the Protem speaker. So in that context, what is the Protem speaker can be an important point for prelims. Let's discuss that. So Article 94 says, even if a parliament, even if a Lok Sabha has been dissolved, okay, the speaker does not vacate its position, its seat, until just before the first meeting of the new house that has been constituted. So after this general election, the parliament met for the first time. The newly formed Lok Sabha met for the first time, and that was the first meeting. Okay, so just before that, the speaker does not remain a speaker anymore, according to Article 94. So then, who will make sure that the proceedings of the house are done, the oaths are administered, etc. So according to Article 95, there will be a pro tem speaker. What do you mean by a pro tem speaker? A temporary speaker, only for a short span of time. The particular functions that are basically fulfilled by the pro tem speaker are to administer the oath to the new MPs. So it'll be the pro tem speaker and not the speaker which will administer the oaths to the new MPs. The second important job of the pro tem speaker is to make sure that the election is conducted. The speaker is appointed by the house itself. So it'll make sure that the election is conducted for the election for the speaker to be appointed for the new house. So these are two very, very important functions of the pro tem speaker. Okay, the pro tem speaker is appointed by the president, and therefore President Murmu has appointed Mr. Mehtab, and according to, there was a lot of hue and cry because a convention was broken. Okay, the convention is, and this is not, please understand, this is not according to the constitution. Often there are pointers in your PYQs where they ask, where they particularly say that according to the constitution, the pro tem speaker will be the MP with the highest number of terms. That is incorrect. This is according to conventions, and conventions can be broken. So that is what it was done here, that when it comes to the senior most member, now senior most does not mean senior according to the age. Senior most member means a person who has served the highest number of terms. So how many times have you become an MP? That will decide your seniority, and according to convention, the most senior number MP in terms of the number of terms is made the pro tem speaker automatically. But this was not done in this time. This was not done with this Lok Sabha per se. That was why the pro tem speaker as a subject became important. But that is all that you need to know. Okay, so with this we've come to an end for today's session. Please make sure that you do not forget to pour your love in the form of likes, shares, and subscribe to the channel. Comment as much as you can. We love it when you appreciate. It means a lot to us. And also do not forget that the offer, that is 24,999, is ending on 23rd of June. So you have 2 days to make full use of it. So subscribe to the channel, and we will see you also on the platform. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you so much. I'm signing off.